the settings. Okay. Boo-doo-boo-boo-doo-boo. Boo-doo-boo-boo-doo-boo. Good morning, friends. Yes, this is the Animation Truman Show, which means this is the place to go if you want to sit and watch the arduous, sometimes, process of creating a real live cartoon. Oh, now I'm live. Okay, so a minute ago I thought that it told me I was live, but I wasn't. Okay, so I just queued it up on Discord. Okay, where are we at? This is the Animation Truman Show. I should edit this title. I'm going to do this right now because this was... I'm changing the show title to the Animation Truman Show instead of throwback to an earlier show. Anyway, okay, so this is where you go if you want to watch the arguably arduous process of creating your own real animated cartoon. So sometimes people show up here and then they ask, what is this? And what it is this, which is, this is a video edit timeline for the entire episode, which is episode 3 of a show called Salt and Light, the Chronicles of Melchizidek. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So the last thing I was working on was this shot right here. It came out pretty good. I did use AI tools to generate the backgrounds for this shot, which I've done a fair amount on this episode. It was a little tricky, actually, to get the color correction and whatnot to match. But, okay, so we got this shot. We're getting close to the end of the episode. We're at, as you can see, 22 minutes, 27 seconds. We're literally 30 seconds away from what theoretically should be the end of the show, because from 23 to 24 minutes, we want to have an outro and teaser. So, all right, so just word to the wise, what I'm going to be doing here in a moment is I'm going to be jumping over to Tahoma and doing a, not a storyboard, kind of a storyboard animatic pencil test, which I'm expecting will carry me through to the end of the show. As far as this live stream goes, by the way, I've got about an hour in which to do this, and I need to stop then because I got a Zoom call with a client at 11 a.m. Okay, what do we got? First bit of advice, I did this shot, I did the whole breakdown in Tahoma 2D, and I happened to pause and think about it just at a key moment where it made sense to say, well, wait a minute, we've got these guys inked and colored. Why don't we just bring it into Krita and add the shadows and the backgrounds? Under many circumstances, that would absolutely be the right choice. Yeah, I kind of regret it, but here it is. So the final shot, the main reason is this. This sequence has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots, okay, that are baked into it. So this is just advice to people that might be looking at this and be thinking about the animation tools and capabilities that are available in Krita, Tahoma 2D, and Blender. They each have their strengths and weaknesses. One of Krita's weaknesses I sort of fed into and created my own problem on this particular shot. So doing the shadows, backgrounds, color correction, and whatnot here in Krita was definitely a win. In fact, here's a big example of that. I was able pretty readily to create a filter mask that isolated just the color of her hair. I had to animate the filter mask, frankly, but basically it really saved my hide because I was able to isolate the color of her hair and actually tone down the saturation. So things like that, Krita is super powerful as a paint program. I won't say it's best of breed, but it's pretty high up there. Things tend to fall apart once you get into the animation space. However, the story is, if you stick to one shot per Krita file, in other words, if this scene had only been up to here, then everything I'm saying would be, it'd still be kind of present, but it doesn't intrude on your workflow. Once you get beyond a shot in Krita that's non-trivial, and I would say anything beyond 6 or 8 layers, 6 or 8 layers is fine. You're gonna have, you're gonna have a pencil test. You're gonna have ink, paint, shadows, maybe a second shadow layer, probably a background, and then maybe some effects. So that's 7, right? Once you get beyond the trivial, and especially in this case because there's entire animated sequences that have been brought in, you basically in the animation space start to have performance degradations that are sufficiently egregious that it's like you want to claw out your own eyeballs. And the biggies are, like if I turn this filter off and then back on, the animation cache now has to be refilled, but there's no telling when Krita is going to do it. So that means when I scrub the timeline, only occasionally does what I see on the screen reflect what's in the timeline. So there's a pipeline problem in terms of how Krita caches things. So things like that. And then when I save, it takes about 30 seconds to save this file. It's like 3 gigabytes. And that's because there's so many frames. So that's totally understandable. But it is an intrusion. It takes like 30, 40 seconds. You say, well, what are you trying to save through the network or something? And the answer is no. I mean, Blender takes a couple seconds to save. A much larger file, by the way. So, but, there's more than one way to approach saving files, right? So it's like, I'm just warning people here to say, if you're going to use Krita for animation, it's wonderful, but stick to one shot at a time. Strong advice. Ignore it at your peril, because you'll just start bumping into things in the corners that make the lived experience of working with the tool really, really frustrating. So you want to avoid that if you can. And what I've found is super powerful tool. Avoid the frustration by not doing what I did here. I basically broke the rule. The reason I broke the rule is because it was all flowing along seamlessly into Home of 2D. There's never a problem with scrubbing the timeline here. You hit play and it goes. So, word to the wise. All right, so what are we doing today? Well, we got this shot done, this whole sequence on the boat. We're basically back to the end of the sequence. So what I want to do is jump back to first Blender. Okay, so if we're going to do the Blender thing, well, I'm sorry, not the Blender thing, but if we're going to do the long establishing shot kind of thing here, probably wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, because what we have in the show is we've got the establishing shot that gets this whole sequence going here, and then it's basically we're into dialogue. Okay, so we're just bopping between the characters, and then here I switched up the well, what we had is, just again, these are just practical things you bump into when you're creating a cartoon. So when we're going along here, this entire sequence, which is literally ending the show, I gave myself the gift of making this sequence the most difficult sequence in the whole show, for the simple reason that every single shot has a panning background, which I think I mentioned this in the live stream the other day. The problem with doing it this way is that you can't reuse your shots. And over the course of the show, I've gotten a lot of leverage out of reusing shots, cutting them up into pieces, playing them in reverse, all kinds of things to just get more usage out of fewer shots. In this case, can't really do it. You got to keep, because you can't have the same background. Well, you can't have it going in reverse, for one thing. Now, I guess that's not technically true. Now that I'm looking at it, you could have a little bit of this. You could have a little bit of this type of thing. Not ridiculous, actually. It just makes it feel like the boat's kind of drifting along. But anyway, so I switched to this angle here so that I could get the camera pointing up a little bit more and just change the perspective on the background. So these backgrounds will be able to be reused in various ways in the final sequence, I guess. We'll see. So what does that look like? Well, if we're going to do the wide shot, that's the question now. So you're going to have to, again, this is the Animation Truman Show, which is what you see is what really happens. It isn't curated. So what I'm looking at is this bit with the boat. Can we reuse this asset from the wide shot and just put it in a different environment? I would say, you know what? Clearly we can. I don't think it's what I really want to do right now, though, to tell you the truth. I think I'm going to leave it in the air that I can always come back and do a wide shot later. Basically use this shot and replace the background and maybe turn the boat on a little different angle or whatever, right? I'm more interested right now in the storytelling. So let's go there. On my other screen that you guys can't see, I've got the script, okay? And so now there's this weird moment where Luka says something to the effect of that he feels bad for Vespar. So these two are bickering, right, as usual. And so Luka speaks up, guys, we can do this. It's a tricky situation. Okay, so now the question becomes, what does he mean by a tricky situation? Okay, so Mel and Tia pay attention. Luka says, I feel bad for Vespar. And they're like, what? He was forced into this too. He's no different than you guys. Okay, and then we have this bit where Mel notices that the boat has no oars. So let me pull this down. You guys will have to forgive me. This is actually software I wrote for generating screenplays, where I can basically load it in a browser running on my local server, and I can go to a script, like here's Fan Futurama. If I save it, obviously you're saving it. If you print it, you can print it to a PDF. It kind of predicts roughly how many pages you have in your document. It automatically generates bookmarks based on slug lines. So like this would be a slug line, as you can see. So you can jump to a scene to work on it. And probably best of all is, even though there's a login here for the underlying CMS, the fact is you don't have to log in. You can just click and start typing and then just save your changes. It's quite nice. Anyway, so here we're at the end of the episode, and this is what we're looking at. And okay, so let's just look at this for a minute. Mel's like, so the boat has no oars. T is like, what? Lucas says, that is more or less true. You think they were stolen? Yes, accursed thievery. Tia says, you do recall that we stole the boat, right? That is a fair point, I suppose. So, not to be a killjoy, but like, assuming we get to Nippur, how do we stop? Have faith, Melchizedek. Faith in... As we approach... Actually, that should be V. As we approach Nippur, I see us being pulled by good fortune into a cozy alcove, surrounded by beautiful pink flamingos. Luka appears lost with happiness in this vision. So he's got a little bit of a dazed look in his eye. Mel and T are both totally nonplussed. They're kind of looking at each other like, what the hell has this guy been smoking? Mel's conciliatory. Well, it's clear you've thought it through. Oh, yes, Luka says. Okay, so then it wipes to Nippur, where the boat is moored in a beautiful alcove surrounded by pink flamingos. And Mel and Tia are standing on the shore. Mel looks at Tia and says, did that just happen? Tia's like, go with it. And they mutually nod. And, hey, Luke, wait up. And that's the end of the episode. And then we hear Asher's voice. Now, who is Menachem? What is Golik's end game? Excuse me. What happened to Asher? Will the kids stick together, or will their alliance be ruined by infighting? All this and more in the next episode. Okay, so that's how the thing ends. So the only thing I have to sort of wrestle with here a little bit is, well, okay, I'm going to animate this, but the fact is it might get cut out of the show. Okay, and by the way, as a screenwriter, I will say that this is a clue for you. If you have a screenplay, okay, and there's something about it, like this little segment right here, Luka says, I feel bad for Vespar. And they're like, what the heck are you talking about? Vespar's the one who's chasing them. He's the prince, the heir apparent of the land. And, well, go watch the show on Amazon Prime or Tubi or something. Amazon Prime seems to be the preferred place to watch it. If you search The Chronicles of Melchizedek, it'll come right up. If you search Salt and Light, you'll get a lot of garbage, but it will be there. So my advice is search on The Chronicles of Melchizedek. Anyway, if you have a bit in a screenplay, and it's like, I like the point that I was trying to make here. He says, I feel bad for Vespar. He was forced into this too. Vespar is no different from you guys. And that makes everyone pause and think. And it's kind of a poignant little moment. Well, let's get to the part and see about this Menachem fellow. Okay, so when you have a situation where you're going, you know, I kind of like the point I was making here. But on the other hand, here, can do this. Okay, so he said it's a tricky situation because it was a lead into the comment about Vespar. In point of fact, that was probably a bad idea. Okay, what he probably should have done is said something to the effect of, we can do this. I'm going to actually just put this in italic. This line, I want to replace this line with something. I'm just not sure what. Okay, here's what we could do. Here's what we'll do. I am going to take this out right now. I'm making the command decision because we only have 30 more seconds for the episode. So we're going to change this to, guys, let's get to Nippur. And then what we'll do is pop this down here. I'm just going to put wide shot, and I believe that's not what I want. That's what I want. Okay. Okay, and Luke's line is simply going to be continued. So for now, this is okay. This is an okay deal, and I'll tell you why it's okay. It's okay because the line of dialogue, and we'll see about this Menachem fellow, that line of dialogue is over the wide shot. So that means, let's see, I want that to be character, and I want this to be dialogue. Because this is over the wide shot, we could just put this off until later. We don't actually have to do it right now. We don't need the monkey chirping in there, by the way. Okay. So that means we can just move forward with this final sequence, and then we can come back and catch the this wide shot if we want to. One way or another, we'll certainly have a way to get in this last line of dialogue, right? So no big deal. All right, cool. So that means we're set. Now we know what our work is. What I want to do is get this bit storyboarded, basically. Not storyboarded, but kind of pencil tested. Okay, so let's go to Tahoma, and this will be 0394W. So file, new scene. File. That's interesting. I guess that's probably in the preferences. So instead of fussing over the fact that it didn't give me the opportunity to name the scene vis-a-vis the splash screen, I will just hit save all, and we're going to go 0394W. Okay, cool. So now let's just get this kind of pencil tested. The last thing we saw, obviously, was we transitioned to this side angle. We left on a close-up of Luka. And Melchizedek was sitting up. Okay. So that's going to be too big, by the way. We'll go ahead and put his eye at least on the rule of thirds. So this is Melchizedek after the bit that we just saw. And by the way, really quick check here on there's nothing going on in the chat, so fine. Let's just focus on creating the show. And if people want to chat, they can chat. Okay. So this would be, I need a moment here. I'm not going to deal with the timing, by the way. I'm not going to even figure out the timing. I'm going to basically use the arrow keys to just go from one concept to the next, and then we'll work out the timing afterwards. Okay, so when we did this before, we were, it's something like this is the, okay. Okay, this would be the back of the boat, and then you got the trees and the shoreline and everything behind him. Okay. So this is interesting because I'm going to hit the D key. All right. Does the D key not work here? I'm using the timeline instead of the X sheet. And oh, okay. Now with my mouse over this, it did work. We'll have to look at that later. Anyway. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give him a little bit of a shift in his body weight. A little bit of a shift, probably forward. B key. Okay, so I think what I want to do is I want him to be a little despondent. Okay. A little despondent. Okay, so if that were the case, then actually the shoulders would probably fall a bit. I mean, I'm not going to do that here. I could, but it would require 2 drawings for the price of 1, which is kind of stupid. Just to be able to show, it would be better to just say, put an indication in here so the shoulders fall, and save all. Okay, so now we can punch this up a little bit, and this is the transitional moment that gets us into the next sequence, basically. Okay. I'm going to hit D again. There would probably be an eye blink. I'm going to have him just look up a bit. And then we'll just kind of move these things around. Oh, hello. Okay. Something like that would be probably the weight shift. Shoulders fall. Okay. Now we're getting into the interesting part. So what he does, actually, let's go back 1 frame. This is the same. When you're animating, you're basically you're having to work in microscopic time, right? And you've got multiple things that are animated, and you're thinking about how this is going to feel at full speed, and it does require some imagination. It does require some imagination. Okay. So he is going to suddenly notice, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new drawing just to shake things up here. Okay. Back of his head. Okay. And this is what is the attitude. The attitude is what's going on here? Okay. Hence, he's going to look back this way. And then he's going to turn his attention to Luka and say, you know, can't help noticing that our boat has no oars. In fact, I think probably the way to do it would be he would actually just speak up. So he kind of raises his chin up. And he's like, okay. And when he says, actually, that would probably get a reaction out of Luka and Tianara, I expect. So we'll just kind of go like this, kind of block him in. Okay, so little despondent, pops up. And this would be, just so you know, kind of rapid. Save that. Okay, so what would happen here would be that Tia, who by the way is in a scowling mood, okay, so we need 2 frames for this. All right. Luka is at the helm, so to speak. Boat. Okay, so that gives us a start. All right, so Luka turns. We'll keep him simple for the moment. Boom, she turns as well. Whoops. Tia, annoyed with Melchizedek as usual. Okay, so that gets us a bit of a reaction. You could have Melchizedek's line of dialogue. While we're on these guys, which is probably the right idea, actually. Okay, so I moved Luka's arm a lot over the other side of the boat. Okay, let's do this. Let's just kind of match that. And then we'll say, I actually like that. Let's put his hand there. Okay, so this would be reused, honestly. Can we do a control drag here? I wonder. Let's find out. I think we can. Yep. We'll put this here. Actually, we'll put this here. Okay, and I'm not going to make a duplicate of this. What I'm going to do is hit the S key and just select everything. Okay, let's hit Control A. Control C, and then come back to drawing 9 and reuse it. Okay, because I want to get a reaction shot from Tia and Luka. She's like, what? Luka doesn't bat an eye. It's not news to Luka that they have no oars. Okay, let me check the script. Where did I put my script? Boink. Okay, here we go. Okay, yeah, so it seems to me we would cut to a close-up of Luka. And Luka kind of looks a little bit off into the sunset kind of thing here. And he says, that is more or less true. Oops. What time is it? 10:18? We're doing okay. And at the end of his statement, I guess we could put in a duplicate drawing here. All right, take that. Okay. So Melchizedek golly, I think I want to do the same thing I did before. I want to use the drawing to give me a starting point. But okay, so S key, paste it in. And then let me just play around with the expression here. What do I think I want to do? So there's a brief pause. Let's hit the D key. And again, we're not really messing too much with timing. We're just trying to get the feel of the story here. Okay. Hand. So you think they were stolen? All right, save our work. And quick check on the chat. Like, again, nothing's going on. Somebody's paying attention. Somebody's watching. Could be Ross. Probably can't be Amar, because if Amar was watching, he'd be saying something. Of course, I haven't said too much that's controversial today. Okay, you think they were stolen? Okay, so now this is an interesting idea. I've got this very clear in my mind. I'm seeing Luka. He's thoughtfully considering that idea. Right? Okay. And he says, what does he say? Okay, so this is yes. Yes. And this is going to be useful. That's not what I meant to do. Accursed thievery. To which Tia replies, okay, so I gotta do this as a two-shot, unfortunately. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a close-up. Ish. Okay. And then just for fun, I'm gonna poke Melchizedek here in the background, sort of peeking around the corner. Technically, he doesn't have to be in the shot. D key. All right, so now I just put that in there. That's a shot that's going to be on the frame for just at most a half of a second. The idea was for her to then turn her head, kind of deadpan. You do recall that we stole the boat. Right. Now it's working. Better save my work, by the way, so I don't lose it. I wouldn't want to lose my work. All right, screenplay. Okay, so we want to take this. Actually, I'm going to say, boy, how do we want to do this? If I hit a D here, does it insert it? There's... I guess the safe way, I don't know all the nuances of Tahoma's behavior in this regard. So I'm just going to do it the safe way, which is hit this and put this here and take this, Control C. I'm doing it this way because I don't want the dialogue in there. Okay. D key. Alright, let's just do what we would do if we were animating this live. We would go, get rid of this. Okay, so this is all just animation. He was in this position, and then he would stop and think for a moment and probably blink. So just for the sake of variety, I'm going to add the blink here. And then he says, that is a fair point, I suppose. That is a fair point, I suppose. Boink, 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 boink. All right, save your work again. Okay, so Mel says, so not to be a killjoy. Okay, so, golly, this is a great example of a scene that if I don't add the backgrounds until the last step, I could get a lot of reuse out of the rendered images once they're even in Vegas. What I'm kind of missing here is this does not, I don't think I can hit Control and drag. Well, maybe I can. Okay. Okay, so that made a copy, but I don't really want it to be a copy, but the only way I know of to do it is to hit the D key and then delete this frame. I don't know if that's the right way to do it. There's probably a better way. In Krita, if you hit control drag of a keyframe, it creates a copy of it, not a clone. In Tahoma, basically it makes a clone. So how you would make a unique copy with drag and drop, I have no idea. So if anybody knows that, let me check if Tom's around, he would know, because he freaking knows everything. It looks like my Zoom call got bumped to 11:30. Okay, so I will send her a note that says, got it. Updated invitation. Yep, there we go. So that can be deleted. Sorry about that delay, friends. Okay, so is there a way? Maybe it's shift drag. Let's see what happens if I hit shift drag. Nope, that doesn't do anything. Alt drag? Nope, that doesn't do anything. Control drag makes a clone. Okay, so it is what it is. I'm trying to grab this little grabber right there and just drag this back to here, because now I've got this green spot for what appears to be ostensibly a blank drawing, but it's just extending it. And for some reason, when I drag this and go to here, it will not let me drag it back. It'll only let me make it longer. So that's a bit strange. Let me look at it on the X sheet. Sorry guys, but this is one of those things that just comes up. Yeah, on the X sheet, I mean, I guess on the timeline, the way you'd probably do it is just hit delete. Yeah, I guess that did it. Okay, anyway, back to this. Okay, so this is saying it's 13. So I'm going to draw a circle here. Oh, that's 12. See, I don't even know if I accidentally moved a... It's too far downstream. You know, I could hit undo a bunch of times. But why this is 13 and not 23 is... Well, I cloned it, then I duplicated it, and then I deleted the original cell. I may be having a dyslexia moment. And the expression here on Mel's face I do not love, so let's just get rid of it. I just want to put... Okay, what is his line of dialogue? One wonders. It is so... Oh. So... Not to be... Can I write today? To be... blank, blank, blank. Okay. Not to be killjoy, but like, assuming we get to Nippur, how do we stop? Okay, so I'm going to approach this, actually, in this way. I'm going to take his arm. I'm going to deliberately do this right now. I'm going to take this arm, stretch it out like this, okay? Just planning ahead here. So the idea, this is not where it's supposed to be, right? But what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and use Tahoma 2D's strengths to my advantage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw his arm, probably, it could be on the same layer. It doesn't have to be on a different layer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw his arm and hand and set it offset from the body so that I can then use the plastic tool to grab the whole arm assembly, move it back to the shoulder position where it belongs, and then I'll be able to animate both his arm. So we're wanting to articulate his neck slash head, and we want to be able to do, obviously, bends on the elbow and the shoulder and at the shoulder. And with the plastic tool, we can do it in such a way that this node here is guaranteed to be behind this node here, which will give us the Z stacking order correctly. So we're going to wind up with something like this, and then probably some protective nodes here along the bottom with the plastic tool, and all the animation will be here, possibly here. So we got this hot spot, this hot spot, this hot spot, and this hot spot are where the animation will be. But that basically gives you the breakdown for this entire shot, which is a pretty long piece of dialogue. It's 3 lines. So he says, so not to be a killjoy, but like, I mean, assuming we get to Nippur, how do we stop? Okay, so I'm just going to have fun with this and say, Luka being Luka. This would actually be a good place for Monkey to make an appearance. So he says, have faith, Melchizedek. And then let's have Monkey do his patented pops up out of nowhere and does the chirp thing. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to say, if I set this up properly, this will be quite reusable. So I'm going to go here, hit the B key, S key now so that I can paste this in, and he's going to say faith in. Okay, at which point what's probably going to happen is his head is going to tilt this way. He's going to have a little bit of a despondent look on his face, and certainly the arms will probably come down. I'd probably do better to put that in a different color, but that's okay. Okay, so now this is going to be an interesting shot, because this is a strange moment for Luka. Remember, he's only like an 8-year-old kid. So I'm going to let him shift around to a proper 3/4 angle. I don't like the way I did his eyes. They're a little too, they don't really look like Luka's eyes, frankly. Let's just redo them. Practice makes perfect, right? I want it to be a little mysterious, so finding the right sort of attitudinal approach or expression is a little tricky. His eyes look too far apart. Whoops. Meant to hit the S key. I hit the E key instead. Instead. This actually is a little bit dubious as well. The feeling would be the feeling of telling a scary story around a campfire. That would be the feeling that he invokes in the way that he says this next line of dialogue. So I'm not gonna draw his hand properly. I'm just gonna get something in there that shows me what the intent was. S key, poof. Something like that. Okay, and he's like, as we approach Nippur, I see us being pulled by good fortune into a cozy alcove surrounded by beautiful pink flamingos. Okay, let's hit the D key. And how would we how would we drive this home? Let's drive it home this way. We would say, well, okay, I hate the way the S key does that. You have to really work with it to make sure it's not gonna give you a selection that's not clean. Meaning, watch, I'll do it 10 times now and I won't be able to get it to do it. There, it won't do it. Let's just try. All right, ready? Wrong. There. It's this thing right here. So it's basically if you overlap it all, I guess, like that, you get this big divot. Obviously, that's my fault, okay? I'm not blaming Tahoma for that. I'm just saying it's something you have to look out for. You can't get moving too fast. Okay, so let's erase this. And he's got a almost creepy kind of look going on. And I'm going to actually do this one more time. I'm going to erase this. I'm going to assume his hand fell down. I'm going to grab his head and that's another thing. You got to make sure you grab these. Okay, so the idea here is that he's essentially staring off into space. I'm going to do a couple things here that are probably not going to work, but I'm going to try it anyway. Poof. Yeah, maybe it will work. Let's see. Let me zoom in. That is creepy. There, that's too big. This is Mel and Tianara. Let's put them on the rule of thirds. Let's not be stupid here. We've had this type of dynamic come up between the two of them before, where it's basically something where they're looking at each other and going, shrug your shoulders. Beats me. Okay, so I'll put a shrug on Tianara so you basically get the idea. Okay, there's the edge of the boat, obviously, and in this shot we'll definitely have to have some sort of background. So, drifting by. Okay, so... Okay, yeah, so then we get a close-up of Mel, and he says, well, it's clear you've thought it through. He's trying to be optimistic here since Luka's acting like he's in total dreamland. And this should appear to be a jump cut from this. And we're almost done with the storyboard. Okay, it's not the best drawing of Mel ever, but that's okay. It's clear you've thought it through. And Luka is still staring off into... It seems like there's a movie poster that I'm thinking of when I'm thinking about this expression. I can't remember what it was. Okay, this is a little problematic. Whoa. Control. That's better. Excuse me. So he's off staring in space. And actually what we should do, now that I'm seeing this, is put Luka here. And here's Tia. And here's Mel. And I think what we should also do is have Monkey right here. Monkey pops up as well. I don't love his positioning. B key, that would be the tail end of the boat. Something like that. Okay. All right. This is going to be this is a wipe. And once we wipe, I can so see this in my head. Okay. We've got the back of the boat here in the water. And I don't even know what an alcove actually is, but I'm going to just assume there's a little bit of land there. There's land back here. A little bit of land. Da-da-da-da. And everywhere we look, there are flamingos, which makes no sense, of course, but boo-doo-boo-ba-doo-boo. Okay, so then in silhouette, actually, no. We don't want the silhouette because I don't want to have to animate Luka walking away. And then I guess we'll just put a title on the screen that says Napur as opposed to in Gripson, you know, we had a whole sign and all the rest. Okay. Melchizidek, Tianara. And Melchizedek says, actually, you know what? Just to make the flow, at least to Western audiences, make a little more sense, I'm going to just reverse these two. Okay. And he says, did that just happen? She's like, go with it. Okay, just for fun, let's see here. Melchizedek would be on the right when it flips from behind. So he's going to flip around. I don't even know if I want this shot in here, but I'm going to draw it anyway just because. And then back here, I guess what I'll do is I'll match this by having her hands on her hips. And he turns. So the idea was he turns and he's like, hey, Luka, wait up. So first thing, this, there it went again. Okay, Okay, now that's bizarre. Okay, so this should be, he should be a little taller. And then probably the two of them together should be, all in all, a little smaller. Okay. And I guess we could, what we could do is have the boat here in the background, maybe. There's the Alka. Here's in the extreme foreground, of course, is a flamingo. Very strange. Very strange. Okay. And based on that, I'm just going to say these guys should probably be centered, kind of between the rule of thirds, and this is simply Melchizedek turning around, so this is erroneous at this point. Sorry. Delete. B key. I know this looks really, really winky. I'm just trying to get the attitudes blocked in. I love Tianara's, the attitude of her body language. One foot out like this, one sort of planted firmly underneath. So this is going to be a D, and so let's erase all of this. So this is, hey Luka, wait up. This is interesting. That actually doesn't work. Obviously. Wait. Well, I mean, it does work if I don't lock into the way I did the legs. He's just supposed to be looping around, you know, he's just turning, actually, and that's the exact opposite way. He's actually doing this. I'm going to go ahead and add one final frame. Okay, and then I'm going to say, just for simplicity, I'm going to make him larger and move him out of the frame, and it's just going to be go to black kind of situation. Okay, and this would be the Asher voiceover. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Probably should save our work. Okay. That's not supposed to be that's supposed to be, I notice the boat has no oars. Yes, that is mostly true. You think they were stolen? Yes. Accursed thievery. You do recall that we stole the boat, right? That is a fair point, I suppose. So, not to be a killjoy, but like, assuming we get to Nippur, how do we stop? Have faith, Melchizedek. Faith in As we approach Napur, I see us being pulled by good fortune into a cozy alcove surrounded by beautiful pink flamingos. I love that expression. They're like, oh golly, what has he been smoking? Well, it's clear you've thought this through. Oh, yes. Wipe to a cozy alcove surrounded by pink flamingos. Did that just happen? Going with it. Wait up, Luka! And then it's the Asher voiceover. Okay, this is great. Okay, this is it. That gets us through the end of the show. The end of episode. Episode 3. And then it's on to episode 4. Episode 3 is a bit of a mishmash. It's certainly not filler, but it's more of a fun romp, whereas episode 4 is going to be packed with information that helps clarify the larger epic that we're sort of trapped inside of. So hence I want to get episode 3 done and out there so that we can get on to episode 4. Episode 4 is going to be effectively a turning point to basically the middle part of the larger epic story. That's kind of what's going on. Okay, so anything going on in the live stream? Not much. Hey, Chizyapo. Do you storyboard only into Homer? It just depends on how you're feeling. Well, yeah, let's see, that was at 10:51. Yeah, that's not too long ago. Yeah, the fluidity of the work in Tahoma is wonderful. The fluidity in Blender is almost as wonderful, and it has the advantage of sculpting tools that can be quite helpful in blocking in an animation. Honestly, it would work in Krita as well, specifically because it's just one layer. Just one layer full of a bunch of frames. Yeah, no problem. Any of the tools would be fine for this. I'm doing it in Tahoma because the last... I guess we should save all. The last shot I did in Tahoma. I thought it went pretty well. I mean, I probably could have done a little better job of maybe using the plastic tool and stuff, because mostly this was all done, everything the hard way, like frame by frame animation. But the thing is, when it was all said and done, it probably took about 4 days or something, but it generated a 20-second long bit. I don't know if it took, it seemed like 4 days seems long. I don't know if it took that long, but just be aware. The problem is right now that spring has hit, I'm giving, I gotta say, 2/3 of my time is going to like restoring windows and doors, redoing paint and caulk and all this kind of stuff. I'm basically focused on my house right now a lot, so that has slowed me down a bit. But yeah, so what I did was I did up to ink and paint here, and then I jumped to Krita to do shadows and backgrounds. The only reason I regret this is because it's the same mistake I've made a million times, which is I packed 5 shots into one Krita file, and so by the time, by the time I get to the last 10%, the last 10% takes 90% of the time, specifically because Krita is so non-performant. So why do I say all that? Well, because to answer your question, the next shot, I'm thinking I'm going to try to do it, just see it through completely all from Tahoma, I think. And we'll see how it goes. But I'm reasonably optimistic that will be. My general life attitude, blah, 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 at this point is, and I've said it for years on this channel, is if you're a newbie to animation and you actually want to animate, okay, so you're not a 3D person. A lot of people come to the grease pencil specifically because they're Blender people, and while the grease pencil is a wonderful tool, the driver isn't necessarily 2D animation, right? It's cool that we can do it, but that's not really the driver to learning Blender. I mean, most people who learn Blender aren't doing it just for the grease pencil. Although for me, I've been using Blender for 25 years, so my approach may be a little different. What am I getting at? Tahoma's the sweet spot. if you want good performance, pretty reliable file management, yada, 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 Tahoma is performant. The thing about Krita that's been driving me up the wall is that I'll make one small change, and then when I scrub the timeline, what I see in the timeline is not accurate. And that's because Krita always has to fill up its animation cache, and it doesn't do what it pretends or purports to do. It claims to, which is, let's go to performance, animation cache. I have the animation cache in memory, but this is the thing that I must not know what it means actually. This bit, enable background cache generation, I believe that whatever that means is not what I intuitively think it means. Because right now, the animation cache is empty. You can see the gray line is gone. So what the hell's Krita doing? I mean, if you're going to fill it in the background, why aren't you filling it in the background? What it actually does is it does do it in the background in the sense that it does it while you're getting onto other things. So the problem is not that it does it in the background. The problem is the trigger of when to do it in the background. And which for Krita, I hate to say this because it sounds so caustic, but it's true. Krita always picks the worst time to do it, because what it basically does is, hey, at the moment you want to scrub your timeline, that's when we'll wake up and go, oh, you want to see what the animation looks like. Okay, we'll fill it now. And so you're always waiting on Krita. That's the problem. If you deal with Krita one shot at a time, only do this much, and then switch to a new Krita file, and you wind up limiting this to generally about 6 to 10 layers at the most, then performance-wise it's not a problem. But across the board, Tahoma is the sweet spot for animators. Pretty quick to learn, really capable tools, absolutely a complete full finished animation show could be done from within Tahoma. Pros and cons, Blender's going to be better on audio. Syncing with audio, Blender is absolutely better. And Blender also lets you edit video, which Tahoma doesn't. So Blender's got you there. Tahoma's good in performance all the way around. Krita's strong on anything to do with painting and layers and blending modes. What you don't want to do with Krita is have long shots, which I, again, violated the rule here. I tend to violate the rule about 2 to 3 times per episode, and I always regret it. So, okay. So for painting, lighting effects, filters, your curves and your blurs and all that, masking, Krita's wonderful. Animation performance, it's horrific. It's worst of breed, which is really too bad. I hope they get it figured out, because it seems to me that under the hood what has to be done is pretty simple. It's just a question when, like right now, the animation cache is empty. Well, I mean, it knows what's going on here, but it doesn't know what's going on here. Now that I'm scrubbing it, then it says, oh, we better figure out what these are supposed to, right? Like, to me, that's like, just do it actually in the background, and you would eliminate a lot of problem, right? So anyway, it's a long-winded answer, but the gist is I bounce around, and right now Tahoma's working for me, as a sweet spot. And by the way, when I first started working on Salt and Light, the Chronicles of Melchizidek, several years ago, it was OpenTunes that I started in. I mean, the show actually began as an OpenTunes project, just for the record. And then what happened was, in the course of episode 1, I started discovering what could be done with Krita. This was back in the version 4 series period of time. And so, anyway, the three together make a good toolkit. You just have to kind of know what the gotchas are that are going to cause you, when it's time to switch from this program to that program. In the case of the current sequence, I was correct to switch to Krita to do shadows and backgrounds. I was incorrect to pack them all into one Krita file. So that's basically the lesson. Do what you want at your own risk. And with that, friends, I am done, because I got other things I need to do, and I have a Zoom call at 11:30. So I achieved my goal. My goal was to sequence the entire rest of the show. So now I know exactly what I'm doing through to the end, and I may be able to pack it all into a single Tahoma file. What's more likely is I'll do the ink and paint probably, Or I may actually just keep jumping back to Krita and doing it one shot at a time too, you know. But obviously there's some plastic tool planned here, so that's going to be um, very much a Tahoma thing. For the record, I guess I'll just, as a bit of due diligence, I'll add this one little detail. If a person wanted the benefits using Krita that you have with Tahoma with the plastic tool in the sense of as an animation tool, this is what you would want to do. Okay, so I've got a scene where I have a character and my character is going to swing his arm around, let's say. Okay, so this is apparently Melchizedek's arm because he's got armbands. Okay, well, you don't have the plastic tool, so you can't set up bones. So what would you do? What you would do is you take this, you go Control X, Control V, then you take this, you go Control X, Control V, okay, and then this is where it gets kind of tricky. You would make this, first of all, you put all these in a group, okay, and then you'd put these two, which is the arm, in a group, and then you'd put the forearm. Is this the forearm? Nope, that's the upper arm. Then you'd put this in a group, right? You with me? And then what you would do is the reason you'd put them in groups like that, and let's just say this is his bod. I'm just showing this to say that if you really want to stick to Krita, it's totally possible. It's just a little bit clunky. Okay, so this would be upper arm, and then this would be forearm. The gist here is that by using the grouping, each part of the body effectively is controlling more than one thing, you see. So there's his arm, and then same thing, you just hit the A key, and you can bend this arm, right? Or you could go up here and take this entire group and move his entire body. If you can do that, then there's nothing you can't do. It's just, as I say, it's a little clunky. And then what you would do is, one of the key trick here with Krita is, number one, you want on each layer, you want to go ahead and put in one animation keyframe. And the reason you want to do that is that otherwise when you move things, Krita will not know that it's supposed to be animated, and it will just be changing the original drawing, which is not what you want. Okay, so now the example of what I'm talking about. Notably, if I was using, hey Williams Art, notably that if I was using transform masks, I would be able to set the pivot point for each of these groups and leave it, and it would stay the same, which would be quite handy. What would that look like? Well, you'd have to put a transform, and you're probably going to see performance start to degrade here, but you would add a transform mask on the main group, which is his whole body, and then the first thing you want to do with a transform mask is put one animation key. Okay, and then you go to this next group, add a transform mask, and again add one keyframe, and then in the final group you would once again add a transform mask, and once again add one keyframe. Okay, now how does this all look? Well, we say, okay, by the way, this is key. When you set up a transform mask, go ahead and set up your pivot points. Kind of important, actually. This would be the shoulder. This would be the elbow, right? Ta-da. Okay, and so then how do you animate this guy? You would go grab this and say, well, he's sitting up. And so this is forward kinematics, in other words. Everything is forward kinematics. Whoops. Okay, stop everything. Stop everything. Stop everything. Undo, undo, undo. I needed to go forward a few frames before I do this. Okay, so I can rotate this. I can rotate this. You're not going to get, again, the benefit of inverse kinematics. You don't get that. Okay? And you may have stuff that you have to adjust a little bit the positioning of. Okay, let's see if it worked. Okay? So then what would happen is if these guys were inked and filled with color, what you would find is at key points in the animation, especially when the character stops moving, you'll have to do um, you'll just have to do some judicious cleanup. Let's just add a layer here so I can see what I'm doing. You'll wind up having to do some cleanup here, maybe here. So you'll have to do a little hand painting, but honestly, that will take you like 30 seconds, right? So this is a totally viable workflow. It's just that in the big scheme of things, it's not particularly performant. See, it's got to fill the animation cache every time. Um, you can accomplish the same thing in Tahoma quite a bit easier, but it's just to say that it is in fact possible if you really want to go down that road. And plus, some people have machines that are more performant than mine. Whatever. So I'm going to save all this. And okay, guys, that's it. I got to get out of here because I got a Zoom call in 20 minutes with a client, and I want to get a little snacky poo beforehand. So it's been great. Good session, and as you guys know, there will of course be more later.